Welcome. We're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Oki, and welcome. So with this next, actually, what I'd actually like to start with is that we have had a major announcement in our division. So I'd actually like to start with the recognition of our announcement of the retirement of our superintendent. And we'll definitely have further celebrations as Cheryl gets to venture on the next portion of her journey of life. But we just want to, as a board, say congratulations on the announcement and make it public so that everybody does know that that announcement has been filed with us. It's definitely big shoes that we have to fill, and it was 9 years with Cheryl with our division, and it's been an amazing 10th year. So at the end of her year here, it'll be that 10 years with our division. So we do appreciate all the service that you've had for our division and our staff and students. So thank you, Cheryl. So with that, we'll move on to our first time our board is doing a consent agenda item. So we had talked about this back in our January meeting, and we figured we would start with a small portion of doing a consent agenda. So on a consent agenda is the committee reports. And at this point, I'll ask if there's anybody that would like to pull something off of that. Jenny.
I'll pull off if it's okay, I'd like to pull off the community engagement. I just want to speak to the piece with the results from the communication survey.
Okay, thank you. And Craig.
Well, could I add my Public School Board Council summary to the consent agenda? Because it was already in the package, but in the wrong place.
I think it needs to be actually that we'll add actually that to our regular agenda just because it hasn't been included anywhere.
Okay, somewhere so we can add that.
Yep.
So, all right.
So we'll remove from the consent agenda the Community Engagement Committee. And if I can have a motion to approve the consent agenda. And that's Jenny. And any further questions? Pardon? Don't need a motion. Okay, we do not need. Pardon?
You don't need a motion for consent agenda. Yeah, you don't need a motion.
Okay.
It's the only thing that's necessary. Anyone want something? For a consent agenda, the only thing that's necessary, if it can be, there doesn't have to be a vote on someone pulling it off. Anyone can pull off an item. And so, yeah, it gets pulled off, put on the agenda, and then that's it. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. And you'll see in future agendas that we'll keep going with that piece, and then we'll add more pieces as we get used to the consent agenda piece. So thank you for that. And next is approval of the agenda. So I do know that we have a couple of items to add. So Christine.
Thank you, Allison. May I add full-time kindergarten subcommittee to the agenda, please?
You bet. So we'll do that as board chair report, and we will do that as 11.3. And Craig?
I'd like to add to 11.2 the school boundary review committee. We need to discuss that. And then 11.4 is the public school board council meeting summary.
Okay. That's the public school boards, so 11.4 public school boards association meeting summary. The kindergarten subcommittee. And 11.2 is the boundary review committee. Okay. Sure. So 11.2 will be community engagement, and then 11.5 will be boundary review committee. Excellent. So seeing no other additions, can I have somebody move the agenda as amended? So Craig, and those in favor? Jenny? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes. So we have two sets of minutes to go through. The first one is January 24th minutes. And I have a couple of things right off the bat that I'll hit because I know other trustees are going to get to them. So the first is all the way. No, I can't find it. The wellness. So under 11, number 11, wellness committee. So it says in favor, and then against is Christina Larkin. So Christina Larkin was actually in favor. So if we can move that to in favor and carried unanimously. And then in addition to that is at the very end, we moved in course, says trustee Christine Light moved that the board move into camera. We also need to move out of camera. So Christine Light moved us out of camera at 7:47. As well, Christine Light adjourned the meeting at 7:47. But we do need to have that on record that we came out of camera, and it was Christine Light that made that motion, and that was carried unanimously as well. Are there any other errors or omissions for the minutes from the January 24th meeting? Seeing none, can I have a motion to move that as changed, and that's as amended, and that's Christine Light, and those in favor? And that's carried. And then if we can move on to our February 14th special meeting, and where it says Christina Larkin moved to reconvene the meeting at 3:12. It does need to state that moved to come out of in camera at 3:12 instead of reconvene the meeting. And that was carried unanimously. And then are there any other errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I have somebody make a motion to Andrea as amended for those minutes, and those in favor? And that's carried as well. Thank you for those little changes we needed to make, but they're important. And then there's no business arising from the minutes, so we'll move on to our associate superintendent's reports. And the first one is Christine with business and operations.
All right. Find my report here. Okay. Always love February because I get to decorate with hearts and things. It's always fun. So facility services, of course, there's always lots going on in facility services. We're just finishing the draft of our 3-year capital plan, which will be presented in March. And there is a copy of that plan in your board strategic planning documents. It's actually a really good resource for data when you're doing your strategic planning. Chinook High School modular classrooms, you see pictures there. They're just about ready for occupancy and they're looking really good. So we'll have 3 classrooms ready to go very soon there. And then the good news is last Thursday, the modular classroom and washroom unit arrived on site at Coalbanks and have been put on the site. And then now we're just going to be doing all the magic that they do over the next few months to do hookups and whatnot and get them ready for occupancy. So they'll be ready for, they probably won't start using them till September, but they are here and getting ready to go. So excited. And then our recycling and organics pilot project is starting in this month. We've got 4 schools. Winston Churchill, GS Lakey, Lakeview, and Plaxton, who will be piloting in some areas of their schools, various bin types for the pilot project to see how they're working, sizes, things like that. So we're excited about that. And the Education Center will also be piloting during that time period. And we'll be pretty much doing a full rollout because, of course, we do not need as much recycling bins as a school would. And so we're kind of excited to do that. And that'll inform what we plan to order for the whole division going forward so that we're compliant with the city's mandatory recycling come September. So we're pretty excited about that. Finance, today's the big day. We're all excited in finance because it is budget day, February 28th. And so we're hoping for good things in education when Minister Taves brings down, tables the budget at 3:15. Unfortunately, we likely will not see details that specifically relate to our school division until we see our funding profile, which will probably be mid to late March. And so as we know more information, of course, we'll update the board on where we're at. We're pretty excited that we will be launching a budget engagement tool. It was shown to the board budget committee this last week, and we did some tweaks. The board will get to, there is a copy of what that tool looks like in your strategic planning binders, and I'll talk to it a little bit in our strategic planning meeting coming up. And then we plan to release that to get some feedback from our public on budget priorities. So, and excited about that. See, technology. Well, we've had lots of great things happening in technology because we've the Lethbridge School Division has become a leader, I think, with regards to esports, virtual reality, 3D printing. We are now starting to become a subject of case studies by, of course, Lenovo, Microsoft. And so that's very exciting that we get to showcase the talents in our school division and some of the work we're doing. We're working a lot with other school divisions on supporting their venture into starting things like esports. And so we're excited about that. And coming up, our division will be participating in a Microsoft and ATLE, which is the Alberta Technology Leaders in Education conference, to speak to them about esports. And so a lot of attention there. And so we're pretty proud of the group of our school division and the technology department for their work. School bus safety. So transportation, I wanted to highlight that Southland has reported to us that they're having some concerns with parents pulling into bus lanes, causing traffic to back up. Also with parents walking their kids, jaywalking with their kids between school buses, causing a hazard, and they're worried that it's in, kids might get hurt. And then also kids watch, right? Watch what parents do. We watch and learn. And so we just wanted to remind parents to make sure they're using crosswalks, make sure they're showing their kids safe practices when they're in and around the buses. And of course, we have a picture of the danger zones with the buses. And we teach kids when we have our first ride event in the summer. That's the first thing they do, is they teach those kids to stay away from those danger zones. And so we just want to remind our families as well to work with their children on that. Is that? And all the other thing is, and I know Jenny will probably talk to this a little further in her report, but the ICE showcase coming up March 9th, and we're pretty excited to be involved with that. That's it.
Thank you, Christine. Are there questions? Go ahead, Christina.
Wrong button, sorry. I just wanted to highlight the budget tool that's coming out. We did get to see it, and it'll be in the package, and it is awesome, and my heart is so excited about it. So I just want to say thank you for that. I really appreciate all the effort that goes into ensuring that we have all the information we need to make good decisions that represent the whole community. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Craig.
On technology, and maybe Mareg can answer this too, there's a fine line between using it correctly and getting kids so that they're addicted. And I'm just concerned about esports that, like at the round table, we had one person that said his grade 5 student came in and played esports. And I'm just concerned that do we know where that line is so that we're not getting kids addicted to technology to the point where it's harmful?
Do you want me to address that, Maury? I know that with esports, and they have we have coaches for esports, and esports is carefully monitored. The kids are coached on the practices and so that they're not becoming addicted. And they're trying to find that balance. And so, and Allison might be able to attest to it because her son went through the program last year and is involved now in the college. It is the whole reason we have coaches is to make sure that the kids are safe, and that we're looking after their well-being while we're going through it.
And I certainly can. And I've spoken with the coach from Lethbridge College, and she really addressed and talked about the piece of the importance of talking with parents about what esports is, and that it's not about kids that are, addicted and playing games. Esports is actually a way that we can help to support youth and young adults that are into the gaming world. Is that it's about building leadership skills, teamwork. It's about that regulation piece, and the actual looking at esports is actually a way of us having those boundaries around what that looks like. So esports is actually a way in itself to have that. And the coach from the Lethbridge College team is interested in coming and speaking with division parents to kind of help them understand what esports is and what it actually does for our students.
Thanks, because I've been reading the book Glow Kids, and it's a little scary on some of those. Yeah, and it's a little scary, but would we, at a later committee of the whole, have someone from esports come in and talk to us? Because I think that's important for trustees to understand that process too.
Morag.
I think it's really timely, Craig, what you are bringing up, and I think it is a bigger global issue. We met with Kason Mahachuk, got to make sure I say it right because it's not phonetic, today. So our digital wellness teacher who's got a pretty huge task ahead. I think when we say digital wellness, there's a belief that we will be talking only about wellness only related to digital use. And I think, even judging from the student form information that we've received that I'll kind of touch on in my report, what we do need to really start to identify and look at is sort of social skill building. Sure, how it can be impacted or influenced through digital use, but then also how are we providing opportunities for face-to-face connection and those skills that are slowly shifting in our system that we're observing, right? And I think what I see with esports, I popped my head in yesterday when I was in LCI, I saw a lot of little boys primarily chatting it up. And so that social environment, and I think of some of the kids who I knew that were in there, probably didn't have as rich of a social experience as they do now when they have esports. That being said, I think we do need to be looking at when we talk about digital wellness and when we work in our classrooms and build that capacity in our teachers, when people say, go to your free time or have free time now, kids typically go to here, right? And I think it is about really looking at that bigger piece of how we allow for skill building on what we're starting to see as more of a deficit from our old school way of knowing how we socially interact, right? And so when we say go to your free time now, maybe teachers say, rather than look at your phone, let's look at 2 other options you could do that involve more social face-to-face interaction, right? So it's a much bigger issue, Craig. And I think Kason is the right man to be tasked with that in conjunction with working with Jesse Sadlowski, myself, the social worker that we're just currently hiring, and then as well, Jen Day. So appreciate that question because I think it is very meaningful. And we as an educational system definitely have to reflect upon what behaviors we reinforce and what behaviors we need to continue to grow, right?
Jenny.
I just speak further to this because this is something I heard a lot at our town hall as well, and both sides of the benefits and the concerns with technology use, both in esports and in classrooms as resources that we sometimes are using with literacy and with translation. It's used in so many different ways, right? And it's such a beneficial tool. And then it also does, there's extensive research on the different ways that your brain responds to a screen versus a piece of paper. And so I heard this a lot. And so I'm just bringing this up to reinforce. I think that this is probably, like you said, a greater conversation and something that I think is worth us looking at as a board and seeking some expertise and some information and some understanding on what is actually being done in our schools and what the research is showing, and so that I would feel more empowered to respond to these stakeholders that were speaking at town hall to this, both raising concerns and offering their gratitude for what is being on. And so it's one of these things where has positive as negatives and people are having different experiences, but certainly very relevant and so worth feeling more empowered to discuss with our shareholders.
Thank you. So with that, we'll lead right into Morag's report for instructional services.
Look who's on the front page of our little welcome February. So yeah, just wanted to really showcase and highlight the great work that happened from the team that worked together to put on and host the student forum. On the break, please do have a look at the poster that was created by Eric Dick, a local artist, that kind of illustrated the magic that we as the adults who were present got to see. Such a neat day. And so we also are regrouping as a leadership group to collate and put into process a plan around what are we going to do with the data that we've gathered. You get little snippets over there in the poster, but you don't get the full picture of the feedback that we received around interests and concerns and ideas that these young people all wanted to share. A really salient kind of moment at the end of the event, the artist, Eric Dick, came over to me and said, wow, I wish my friends could all come and have a look at these young people who can have very different opinions and talk very respectfully and connect and listen in such a respectful way. And it was a really heavy hitting time. Kids from all walks of life and experiences, and the wellness team members from each school who also participated really did share. Initially, I think they were a little overwhelmed with the plan and weren't sure what was going to happen. And they rolled in and we fired through 2 hours of conversation. Could have done it for 3 or 4. And the kids actually said after the event, wish we had more time. Can we do it more regularly with our own schools? And they not one of them said they didn't feel heard. So I want to say kudos to the wellness teams from our middle and high schools. They did a great job of facilitating conversation, ensuring every student felt valued, ensuring that students were practicing those social skills that we were talking about a second ago, Craig, that I only saw one cell phone out, and it was because they had to talk to their mom about pickup. So yeah, just really, really pleasantly surprised about how smoothly the event went. And yeah, just kudos to the crew there. So thank you for that one. A couple extra pieces that, of course, as I've mentioned to the board in the past, after submitting these pieces to Kristen, we have 2 weeks of a gap or a week of a gap, and lots of things have been happening in the last couple of weeks. We have an additional $20,000 in nutrition programming that is reserved that we can spend this year. So we're working with the schools that have identified that they would still appreciate some additional funding for feeding programs. I know that impacts Poverty Committee as well, so just to let them know. And we've had 4 schools indicate interest in additional nutrition programming and having access before the end of the year because they've already spent up. So that's just an idea of how much our students are really needing that nutrition support, and as well how much our schools are starting to look at more of a universal presentation for their nutrition programs. Just yesterday, I got an opportunity to meet with our new Spanish international consultant from Alberta Ed. Really great new connection. And he has lots of beautiful ideas on how we can continue to receive PL, practicing current, practicing current practices that we're seeing within CBE and Edmonton. Really proud to say that we are one of 31 schools that offers a Spanish bilingual program in the province. That's not that many. And he was delighted to see what we were doing yesterday in our programs. And he also did entertain, and I have yet to speak to Mike, it shows how busy both Mike and I are, the opportunity of exploring hiring Spanish teachers from Spain. And Edmonton and Calgary do that piece. And as you guys have known through the past, we have really encountered greater and greater challenges as our program is growing in securing and hiring people who speak fluent Spanish or are native Spanish speakers. We all know that the quality of a Spanish program or a French program is the quality of language that is being spoken in the classroom. And so that's an exciting opportunity that we are going to explore more. And Mike and I have yet to talk about that. So I apologize to Mike for not yet mention that. Last thing is we are going to be attending, we as in, I believe, Jim and Jen and myself, March 6th and 7th. NAC Tatter. I know you love those mnemonics, Craig. NAC Tatter is, and I wrote it down for you because I knew you'd ask, where did I put it, Craig? I did put it somewhere. Essentially trauma event system related to VITRA. What we are seeing is a lot more complexity, and I'll tell you, I'll text it to you when I find my notes. But we know that we've got to really sharpen our skills working with students that are coming out of the pandemic. And given the level of complexity in the VITRAs that we've been doing more and more, we recognize that there's a lot more work that we need to do in training around digital use. And again, that involves that digital wellness portfolio, but really needing to build our skill set and review what the presentations of the students who we're doing VITRAs on are now showing, because it's quite different than pre-pandemic when we were using the VITRA model. So exciting to be able to sharpen our skills. So many little things going on. And to really Karen's credit, related to all of the boost work that's going on, they've now rolled into numeracy work. So she was training her crew mid-February, and what a neat group of people they are. They're so driven and so connected to our schools, and the students are ready. And just such a great service and support to our teachers as well that are receiving those boost teachers in their schools. So a thank you to the teachers, and then also a thank you to Karen and the boost folks for sharpening their swords and now doing all things numeracy after doing all things literacy pre-February. I think that's enough. You guys have enough to talk about.
Questions and comments? Andrea.
I loved hearing about the student forum. Thank you for sharing that. It looks so exciting. I was one of those people who really wanted to, be there, but I totally understand that it was for students, not for me. And thanks for everything that you're doing. And I wondered, I know you talked the other month about Jackie Fletcher and you and some principals having a think tank about behaviors, and have you been meeting recently and have some strategies to share?
What I think we found with having these complex behavior think tanks is there's a lot. I would encourage maybe a quick presentation, even, or an update next board meeting. We've had 2 meetings now, and we really have gone through developing that understanding of what is behavior in our schools, what behaviors are we seeing, how are we responding, and even within that process of looking at complex behaviors as a school system, we're realizing within that there's some great work that we have yet to do around meeting the needs of supporting our staff in working with complex behaviors and sharpening their swords on what are some promising practices there? Because again, we're recognizing that trauma-informed lens is very different from the good old days of when we dismissed a student who showed complex behavior to the principal's office and we sent them home. So, and not saying that we do that any longer, but there's a continuum of understanding around how we work with behaviors and support behaviors. So I would just recommend Jackie comes in and does a quick little report. We do have our second meeting with the ministries tomorrow. So it'll be interesting to hear from their perspective how they are working, everything from conversations we've had with FSCD to AHS to even our camp programs. We know that we've got some challenges just with resources and community supports. And so it's a very wholesome or fulsome program. And I would actually like to probably share those notes as well of what the conversations have looked like with the board up to this juncture, just so you get a summary of what that has presented as. So sure.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Christine.
Thank you. My question is about digital wellness, actually. I see that you're interviewing for a family support worker. So my question is, what is that role going to look like? And are they only working with students and families? And then my question to follow is, how are we as a division embedding support for best practice with our staff and in our division? And I know that this is I recognize this is a longer conversation, so I'm not looking for that longer conversation now, but
So just for clarification, the first question is, what's the role of the family support worker under the wellness umbrella? And then what is sort of best practice and how are we working through the best practice piece for digital wellness? You brought that, you stinker. We do have a job description for our family support worker, very similar to the initial posting that we had out in January. And essentially, the goal of the family support worker is to work alongside families and students, just understanding that there's a real gap of understanding or connection around the age 30 to 50-year-olds and how they've used technology traditionally, than how their children or their youth are using technology. As I mentioned, I think in the past meeting, our digital teacher is much more of the proactive, creating lessons, teaching alongside teachers, presentations to families, to teachers, right? And then we see the family support worker doing more of the reactive side, or the real deep work that principals have identified that they are not able to have the time to do. And so really that social dynamic and constellation of even referrals out if mental health is needed, and that long term, because I think and even talking with Kaysen today, it was so beautiful because we started to talk about this isn't a punishment model, but it's a working with model and working alongside model. And so what currently our principals, I think, are really struggling with in trying to manage, and they don't have the time to do, our family support workers, when it's something related to misuse of technology, will be able to do a 4-hour connect with the family, with the kids, with the teachers, scaffold with Kaysen to say, what are the needs that we're seeing within our classrooms, and how can we parallel that? Because we're seeing repeat issues at many campuses. And so that's where we can have a tandem working alongside, where the intervention is informing the prevention work, and we can provide greater development in that regard. And so when we talk about best practices, I'm very connected to Safer Schools Together. It's an agency that works primarily in British Columbia. Sam Jingfors, he's a gentleman that we've accessed here quite regularly around just digital wellness, and we'll be connecting with them quite regularly. Kaysen's been doing some work with CBE as well. Already a friend of his does digital wellness in CBE. And so we're also providing just lots of partnerships where I think this is, again, the plane that we're building as we're flying. I think it's a fairly new topic. And so what we're really looking to do is just continue to get all of that information as we go. And the plan for me as well is to meet weekly with Kaysen and with the support worker together, and Jesse and Jen as necessary, just to kind of try and just give him support because he's a young teacher, which is really exciting, but also working in a system as a division lead is quite daunting. And I think the tasks that are mapped out are pretty coordinated. So yeah, does that help you?
Christina, you're good. Okay, and Jenny.
Sorry, Morag, I have more questions for you. So, as far as I understand, this is something we were able to add to our division because we received that grant. So, are these currently just temporary things? 2 years. Okay.
So the grant was for 360,000, which allows for us to hire until 2025.
Okay. And then with that, so are they being accessed across the division by all schools at all levels? Both of these support workers?
So with anything with 2 people and a division of 12,000 students, in sitting with Case, and we had to really map that out today. And again, someone who's used to working in a classroom, multi-level, grade 6 through 8, he's ready to go and he's got this enthusiasm and people are calling him and asking, come to my classroom, you can come and teach my class. We've said, okay, whoa. We need to take a bite of the cookie, not put the whole cookie in our mouth, right? And so what we've said as a group, Jesse and Kaysen and I, we targeted middle school, but what we'll be targeting is grade 6 to start for the month of March. And when we say targeting grade 6, he's going to be developing lessons that align with learning outcomes in health, that connect as well to issues we're seeing in grade 6 that assist teachers in using them. And so the big goal is to eventually have something like our Indigenous Ed folks that have a Padlet where teachers can click on and access teachable lessons and feel comfortable and competent in that. So I'm hoping to see Kaysen perhaps teaching the first lesson alongside with a teacher and then letting the teacher flow with the other 2 or 3 lessons that will have connection. We do know that some teachers are really comfortable and confident with teaching health curriculum and other teachers are not. And so his goal is to support them in that process as well so that they start to feel more comfortable and confident implementing health curriculum. Because I think judging from the I know because we've got feedback that's very data driven. We know that we haven't done a great job of implementing health curriculum. It's one of those things that tends to be on the side of our desk as classroom teachers, and it's something that sometimes we just think is implicit in how we teach. But I think making those learning outcomes more discrete and building the confidence and competence of our teachers, that's kind of the goal of where we're going with that.
Andrea?
NACTATR, North American Center for Threat Assessment and Trauma Response. All right, there we go.
Because I'm on the wellness committee, I have this great handout, and maybe you could send it out to the board, and then it really highlights a lot of what.
When it hits its final draft, because we've had to make some tweaks on it today. And then when we hire our social worker as well, we'll need to probably just amend a couple things. But yeah, I didn't say this, Jenny, sorry, I didn't answer the one question. Grade 4 to grade 9 as well is sort of what we're thinking for the role of the teacher and probably the social worker will be more grade 6 to 12, gauging the social support piece. Okay.
Craig?
This is probably more of a comment, but again, I'm a little leery when the government announces all this money for mental health, and obviously we can hire 2 people for 2 years. That's not enough. I mean, and the other problem that I see is that some of these, like a family support worker, that sounds more like social services and stuff like that. And so I think one of the goals that we need to start doing as a board with the ASBA and public school boards is more advocacy to have coordination of services between social services and education, because that's where the cracks are. And what happens after 2 years? I mean, that's the big question. So they put this money in, 2 years later, they go, well, no, we're not going to spend any more money. Now we've created a program, but we don't have the money to fund it. And so that's just a comment, don't need to, that we need to advocate at ASBA and public school boards more and more to get the government to work together to help these kids.
And I think not only that advocacy, but as we come forward with a provincial election on the horizon, I think it's important as a board that we look at what what we stand for as a board and what we want to advocate for in candidates that are running in the upcoming election. So, Morag?
Being super mindful of little pots of money that come our way. We're always thinking about sustainability too. And I hear you loud and clear, Craig. And I think coming out of the pandemic, mental health has been the big focus. I'm hoping that the magic that Kaysen puts into place and develops the lessons, and then the social worker who also other social workers within our system, they say social work is a qualification. They aren't social working, but they are supporting, right? Other counselors, other support workers or FSLCs are doing that work already. And so the goal would be the huge quantity of issues we're seeing with digital citizenship and wellness. If we're doing a good job on the teaching side with the units and lessons, and if we're doing a good job of educating our parents and our kids around appropriate use, in a couple years, well, maybe in 5 years, but we're hoping that need will become less. But I do echo your sentiment in regard to the funding piece and supports.
And definitely the funding piece is what I've been asked a lot about, is in regards to where's the funding coming from and what's the sustainability of it, and is it out of our regular budget similar to our other lead teachers, and just really that it is that grant piece. So thank you. Seeing no other questions, we will move on to Mike for the human resources report. Thank you.
Thank you. So the report is there. I'll just hit a couple of the highlights for you. Under the section where it says other highlights, two things I just want to call your attention to. One was Jolene and Carrie had an opportunity to go to Medicine Hat for a career fair and meet with prospective employees and just kind of spread the word about Lethbridge School Division. So that's certainly part of our recruitment strategy. We go to a number of career fairs. Certainly we have lots of ways that we can advertise positions, and that's one part of obviously attracting employees to the division. The next bullet point where it talks about where Stacy and Rhonda facilitated a professional learning session for our head caretakers, that really speaks to the retention part of it, because we often focus on recruitment that when that we need to attract more candidates, and we always do, but we also need to pay attention to retaining folks that we have, make sure that we're providing them with opportunities for growth and all those sorts of things. So that's another great example of the work that the folks in the HR department are doing in that regard, to not only attract people to the organization, but also to make sure that we're doing our part to help build capacity and give people an opportunity to grow who are already in our organization. So yeah, really happy with the work that they're doing. As you can see on the second page here, the 2023-24 staffing process has begun. So that's always a busy but exciting time. We're in the process of filling some principal positions. So certainly looking forward to completing that. Then the one I wanted to make sure, I know the board is aware of this, but our Spirit of 51 recognition program, really exciting opportunity to recognize our non-teaching staff. And it's just, I mean, we had so many people nominated, and colleagues nominate colleagues, people that work, co-workers nominate each other, which is really cool. And then the board hosts an evening, which will be next Wednesday, I believe it is, March 8th. And a great opportunity to recognize the outstanding work that folks do. So when we talk in those wellness sessions about creating a culture of wellness and recognizing the good work that people do, here's a great example. Next week will be a great opportunity to do that. So yeah, we're very excited about it. There's lots of work to get done to get it all prepared, and it'll be a wonderful evening. So those are the highlights, unless there's questions for me.
Excellent. Craig?
Yeah, on the top part, supporting schools, 38 more staff have been hired. Now, are those replacement staff? Are they new positions? So it just.
Yeah, mostly this time of year you're working with replacement, but it could be new. It could be new staff members as well. So it could be due to a maternity leave, a paternity leave, a medical leave, a resignation, some new funding. I mean, obviously we're just working. We literally just started somebody for Morag's position. She's in the process of interviewing for another position. So yeah, it's a whole combination of things.
So yeah, that's a lot of them are just replacements of
Correct. And
certain
with,
things.
yeah, and within those 38 will also be people who are new to the sub list.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
So there's always, it always looks like a lot, but there's always a revolving
Yeah.
number of people
All
coming
right.
through.
There's a little bit of a confusion on this side that you're hiring for Morag's position.
I didn't say I was, but yeah, I said, yeah, more eggs in the process. If I said I was hiring, that would be wrong.
So they were confused on this side of the table.
Oh, no. Morag has, yeah, Morag has a position that she is interviewing for, not, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes. Gotcha. Yeah, yes. No, to be clear, I'm not making any announcements, her wellness positions that she needs to hire for. Yeah, yeah, just off the cuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make
Thank
sense,
you.
Craig? Does that answer your question? Yeah.
My question was similar to that when I look at the 25 teachers in the past 5 weeks. So that is, some of those are for positions that have left, but also for the future as well. Like they're not.
Yeah, so there's a few things that happen this time of year. First of all, we just have our semester change, so there's some hiring that occurs there, especially at the high school level. They always have classes that are a little full, and they need to do some hiring there. Some of it is people that are on different leaves, mat leaves, that sort of thing. And particularly, we see a little more of that type of stuff in after that Christmas break and that sort of thing. So yeah, and we seem to have a number of mat leaves that we're filling right now. So.
Not seeing any other. Oh, Andrea, go ahead.
I'd just like to thank you and Carrie and all of your staff for making the Spirit of 51 recognition planning so easy for Tyler and I, and we're looking forward to that. It was exciting to look at that list and see names I recognize and didn't recognize. So look forward to celebrating them next week. And all of you, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And moving on, we have our superintendent's report. And Cheryl, with the first is the board priorities report.
Right, and again, the purpose is to keep the board apprised of what we're doing in all of the areas in our planning documents that support the priorities of the board. And so I know that you've all read that, so just a few highlights. Arts Alive and Well in the schools. I know that Karen Ransford, Kathy Canelson is meeting with the Alberta Art Gallery and planning for the event this spring. It'll be exciting because it'll be in person. I'm thinking it's likely going to be similar to last year, where it's primarily a secondary focus, and but we will continue to do the elementary celebration online. Great participation last year in terms of, because of course Garrett does sort of that whole gallery of online art, and then we can have sort of our picks of what it is that we like. I know I can't remember, Mark, whether you spoke to we just submitted today the proposal for additional funding for more grade 1 boost programming. And so thank you to, it was very, very short timeline that was announced just 10 days ago, I think 11 days ago, and Karen worked hard with our numeracy and literacy lead teachers to get our numbers together to submit for right now the current boost program, what we call boost, which is learning gap funding that the government calls, and it provides intervention programming to students who are identified as needing extra support in literacy and numeracy. And right, the first round of supports in the fall was for grade 2 and 3. Now this most recent round of support is for grade 1. And so those hopefully we'll get approved for support in that for funds, and that we'll be able to move forward with that for our young grade 1 students, I would hope by April. The province, if they move that forward quickly enough.
And there's a good chance we'll have to do some hiring.
And yes, it depends upon how it overlaps with the current boost teachers, right? So it'll overlap somewhat, so we may need to hire another contingent of teachers to provide that intervention to our grade 1 students. And just a heads up, March 18th Skills Canada competition is being hosted by Lethbridge College, so that's exciting. And so certainly we'll have some students in there. Really our off-campus programming is really caught fire and just lots of exciting things. We've got we had a strong connection with the college. We've got over 33 students are registered in dual credit with the college. We've got 3 classes of students engaged with the University of Lethbridge this semester. And so certainly a strong program. And of course, we've got Andrew working hard on our off-campus with our rep and and Darren Gibson with our off-campus programs, including registered apprenticeship program. And so certainly we're really seen as having a lot of strength in that area. We have, and actually I think if, when we were up at Team Lethbridge, we made the point that Lethbridge actually has more RAP placements than Calgary. Because we have such a strong support from business. And just got an email today. There was 5 school jurisdictions. Was it 6? 5. West Winds, Holy Spirit, Livingston Range, Palliser, and us 5. Who put in an application to the province to explore collegiate institute. We're approved. The group was approved to now put together a business plan to the province. So that would be really exciting. And of course, that's in collaboration with Lethbridge College. And so it's actually Palliser who took Jason from Palliser who's taken a strong lead on that, but everyone working together to try to move that concept forward. We'll see how it goes. And as Christine knows, and Christine, that was a big focus of some scheduled meetings that were outside of the regular scheduled meetings when we were up in at Team Lethbridge. So it certainly had hopefully some good outcomes from that, and we'll move forward with that. Innovation and technology, I can't help but continue to be incredibly amazed and proud of our technology department for the kinds of innovative practices that they're bringing into the district. That they're just so responsive to every time our classrooms need something. And just wanted to, and maybe you mentioned it, Morag, of course, coming up March 21st will be the flag raising at the Education Center. So that's going to be a true celebration. And what else did I want to point out? And I don't know whether trustees were sent the email that from Karen that has the little mini learning sessions about the Learning Commons about the Learning Resource Center that Kathy Canalson did. And I really, so I talked to Karen this morning about with professional learning really moving forward strongly with what are called sort of learning bursts, really short, quick learning videos for support staff, for teachers, learning bursts so that people can access them quickly, go, oh yeah, that principals can show them at staff meetings, that type of thing, just to remind people of the types of resources and support structures that are in place at a division office level. So that was exciting as well. And that is it. I know that next Thursday, there's sort of an overlap of the ATA induction banquet with the ICE scholarship. So, it will be sort of, I know, divided efforts among the board as well as executive council. We've sort of split up into 2. And I know that there's going to be some pretty exciting things at the ICE scholarship. But just one unique thing is Coalbank's, their little news crew there are going to be actually being the news crew at the ICE scholarship. They'll be interviewing the student displays. They'll be interviewing the sponsors, and then they'll be putting together a video to put on our website. And those are great 4 or 5 students. And so they're going to be there as the news crew. So along with regular media. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Excellent. Craig.
Yeah, under governance, I would like to add, make sure it's in the minutes, that I attended the Public School Boards Association Council on the 9th and 10th, and that Allison and Christine Light and myself attended the ASBA Zone 6 meeting via Zoom. So,
Cheryl.
So just for clarity, this report is sort of put together by the administration to let the board know what we've been doing to support the board. So to put, I don't know if I'm making sense. So to put what the board's doing in that report would also have to put out a call out to the board to ask what the board's doing. That would sort of be a different kind of report. This is to keep the board apprised of what we're doing as sort of your workers. If that makes sense, Craig, and maybe I'm interpreting it different than what this board would like.
Well, if we're going to be governance, there's got to be somewhere in our report that shows the public what we're doing as governors, and that's being with our stakeholders. It says engagement with stakeholders. Well, ASBA is a stakeholder, public school boards is a stakeholder. So I think it's important that when we do this report, we also ask if we've done something. For instance, there's municipalities, so it should be under that report when Allison and Christine meet with the city council. To
Okay.
me, that's part of governance.
So we can certainly look as a board to how we would like to represent the work that we do. This is a report to the board. So this report is not for demonstrating what we as trustees do, but we can certainly have a future conversation in regards to how we report the work that we are doing towards our goals and our priorities. But this is, like, the title of it is report to the board. So it's not what we are doing as a board, but what the division is doing towards our goals.
Yeah, and I would appreciate that conversation because I think it's important for the public and our stakeholders within the school division to know what the board is doing outside of just meeting as a board.
For sure. And we can put that on a future committee of the whole meeting even for us to look at how we want to report those pieces. So okay. I had Christina's hand and then Christine's.
I keep turning it off because it's low battery. Yeah, I just want to offer. I appreciate the reports here, and I think we had talked about the topic of how does the board report out to the public as well as a separate one. So I would either ask and maybe maybe we add it as a memo for the future one or something. Because I just want to honor the work that goes into this reporting on behalf of all of the school staff. And I'd like the conversation that we have in the future to be just also about like reviewing the type of reporting that we require of school staff, because reporting is extra. Go team. Thank you. Yeah, because reporting is so time consuming and gosh, I'm gonna explode. Sorry. It's very time consuming, and we want to honor the time that we want dedicated to students. And how do we most efficiently receive feedback to assure our role, which is just ensuring that harm is not happening and things are going on. The only thing I would note is I wasn't sure if you wanted to put the town hall under engagement with stakeholders, because that was at the beginning of February, a lifetime ago. Yeah, thank you.
And yes, we'll certainly have it dedicate time to us looking at the reporting piece, not only for us as a board, but for the reports that we get from executive and our superintendent. So any other comments or questions? Christine?
I won't reiterate things that have been said, but I think our board does, certainly we can have future conversation, but our board iterates to the public what we do outside of board meeting in our reports and in our highlights. And so there's great opportunity for the 7 of us to share our experiences and the things that stakeholders have come to us with. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Seeing nothing further, we'll move on now to donations and support.
And I say, I think just about every board meeting, how fortunate we are to live in the city of Lethbridge and the surrounding area that are so incredibly generous in terms of donations to our schools, who support our students and families. And the list is there for board review. And go on to acknowledgement of excellence. Any questions about the board donations? About school donations, sorry. Acknowledgement of excellence, we've got through our 3 schools, Lakeview. So just a few highlights, 25 different languages represented at Lakeview Elementary School. Oh my goodness, right? That sort of really symbolizes the diversity that certainly we have to celebrate in Lethbridge as a city, as well as in our schools. It always fills my heart when I read about schools really embracing and moving forward with things that we've been working on to improve learning, such as building classrooms and literacy, numeracy intervention, and the whole idea of active community building. That's been a real goal of our schools this year. And re-engaging parents, re-engaging community, getting kids active, and that certainly comes through as well as their wellness block, and focusing on emotional well-being. And so that whole idea of wellness and how do we support more students with wellness is those universal strategies, in especially at an elementary level, where all students are learning about and talking about wellness. And because certainly there's in terms of having that specific professional expertise, that there's never enough of that to go around, but certainly having, and I know Morag's group instructional services has been working really hard on universal strategies. Chinook High School, again, you'll see that reestablishing its community, all of their co-curricular, extracurricular clubs. Oh my goodness, our schools are buzzing again, and our staff and community volunteers working really hard. And just like Morag talked about student voice with the division-wide community student forum, Chinook also has been moving forward with, as well as their other high schools, having some student voice in terms of part of their planning processes, which is exciting. And then we've got Patterson. And Patterson, of course, we take a look, and again, we've got that literacy, numeracy assessment, that emphasis moving up into our middle schools, which is exciting. The building thinking classrooms piece is really caught on strongly in in all of our schools, including middle schools in our numeracy areas. And as well, I know that Patterson has been really at the forefront of really taking a closer look at assessment and reporting, and what's important about assessment, what's important about reporting, and are we really serving our students in terms of them thinking about their own performance, them thinking about and assuming responsibility for what they're doing, and are we giving the right kinds of information to students and parents? There's our French immersion that brings that whole extra dynamic to that school, and adds to its complexity of a school. And then, of course, we've got the citizenship pieces, as well as their full on 100% into their co-curricular, extracurricular activities as well. My question to the board is, I wasn't sure, and I asked Kristen to put on pause, are we wanting board tours of all 3 schools again, or are you wanting one of the schools, some of the schools? I know, so I guess I just leave it to the board to give Kristen and I direction in terms of whether we're arranging for a visit to all 3 schools or some of the schools.
Craig.
Yeah, I was talking with Tyler when we did the, no, it was General Stewart, and I appreciate his comments. I think with some of the comments over the last month or so, we're pretty busy, and some people have jobs, not that I don't, but I'm more retired than others. And it might be better if we only do 1 school a month. We have 4 years to do all of that. And so I'm bringing that up so that I appreciate that Christina works, that Christine works, Allison works, and Tyler works. And so, and Jenny does work too. She's got more than a full-time job, but anyway, I just think that it would be better served if we don't load everybody down with 3 visits a month. So I would propose that we do 1 a month, and we just put the other ones as we come through.
Is that consensus?
So I'll just have Kristen draw out of a hat which one of those 3 schools and let you know?
Yep.
Perfect.
Christina?
Feel free to use your discretion about which school has the capacity to offer that. I think that it's a large commitment for schools. I found like it was a long time to visit, and I know that that's disruptive on learning, which is what we're here to support.
And because we'll have a new administration next year at Patterson, perhaps it'd be nicer for the board to visit with whoever that new principal is. And so we'll leave Patterson until next year, the year after. And so we'll either have Chinook or Lakeview, and we'll let you know.
Craig?
The only other thing that I would like to bring up about the visits too is that we had a Southwest Alberta retired teacher. We meet at the ATA/school board building, at the Atwell building, I think it's called. And I think it would be nice somewhere down the road if the board could meet with our people that work out of the Atwell building for lunch or something. Yeah, and just so that we're aware of it, but it doesn't have to be right away, but I just put it on the board's docket because I think that would be important to meet some of our staff that go unnoticed a lot of times.
Sounds good. We'll have that planned, and Kristen will work together to figure that out with each of us. One more item, if we're okay to go onto it with the calendar of events. I don't think it'll take too long. And then we'll get on to our guests. Sounds good. Christina.
All right, I had one more question I forgot
Oh,
from the board priorities report for the tech and innovation one. We're talking about this being able to supervise what's on students' screens. Does the board need to be talking about AI at all at this point, or is this just a media thing?
Actually, that's actually a very good question, because certainly AI is a conversation that's been very active around the schools. What are the really positive and exciting things about AI? What are some things that perhaps we're a little bit skittish about or a little bit tentative about? And certainly we did have a conversation about AI among the administrators, among our high schools. The high schools, of course, were the first to talk about, the most sort of knee-jerk reaction to start is, the cheating possibilities. And so certainly lots of different ways of knowing and understanding your students, and knowing and understanding your students' work, and knowing and understanding whether something has come from through that student's voice, that student's work, or someone else's. What you saw in the tech report, you're right. They're of course, that's why I say the tech department's always sort of ahead of the curve already. They've for testing purposes, and for if someone's wanting, if a staff member is wanting a secure testing experience, where students can't access things like AI or any other online assistance, there is that tool that's explained in the board priority report, that where a teacher can monitor all of the screens and what's going on all the screens, and we can sort of lock or unlock certain aspects of what students have access to. Lots of exciting things with the artificial intelligence. Here's some exciting things. Qualitative coding. I could take the comments from the spreadsheets that were put together from town hall thought stream, put them into, and I did an experiment. I did one section how I usually do my traditional way of coding and doing qualitative analysis. And I used artificial intelligence to do that same section, and we were the same except for one theme, which actually I had combined two of the themes that that the computer intelligence had set. And then it actually sorted things as well. So there's some really exciting possibilities with it in terms of the kinds of things that it can do. And our staff and central office leaders and everyone else is experimenting a little bit with what are some really great things. And how can, just like anything in education, how can we leverage this new knowledge, this new technology, to really have students thinking, compelling students to think even more creatively, and to compel the greater possibilities for critical thinking paradigm and application of knowledge, as opposed to just simply writing down or accessing knowledge. And so it's a really good, certainly a conversation in the education community everywhere, post-secondary, our division. And so we're really looking at examining artificial intelligence is how can we use this in a really positive way? What are some incredibly positive aspects of artificial intelligence? And what are some things we need to be wary of? And what are some things we need to keep an eye on? So good question.
Thank you. So with that, we'll actually put the calendar events after our presentation. So I will have Morag, if you're good to introduce our special guest today.
I think the joke was I'll introduce Jackie Fletcher, our Director of Inclusive Ed. And then Jackie can introduce Rochelle, our early education coordinator. But two fine folks, and I have the pleasure of working with Rochelle as well every once in a while. Wink, wink. But I think today it really is a presentation from Rochelle's side to assist the board in navigating early education programming, EAP, and program unit funding, PUF, and then how that all kind of works its way out into the work that Rochelle does so magnificently with our ELEs, early learning educators, and EAs, education assistants, in our EAP programs. And kindergarten programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Rochelle, and she has a great little presentation, really comprehensive. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Rochelle. Rochelle really does go with the flow. She is an early education, yes, maestro. So if you have questions as we work through these slides, please don't hesitate to leap on her. So you can go over there. Yep. Yep. In.
Did I pass the first test? Thank you. Thanks for giving me a minute to get organized as well. Thanks for the introduction, Maureen. And thank you for providing me the opportunity to come and speak a little bit around the overview of supports and funding in our ECS programs today. I'll go through the slides that I've prepared, obviously with the information, and then if there are any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so early childhood services, or ECS, which you most often hear it referred to, refers to any programs that are funded by Alberta Education prior to grade 1. And when we look specifically at the kindergarten programs, the kindergarten refers to the ECS year immediately prior to grade 1, and kindergarten is intended as a one-year program. We do have potential for funding for a second year of kindergarten, but only if a child is receiving a code 10, developmentally immature, where it's decided that that second year would be beneficial for them. In our early education programs, or EAP, which is most often what we refer to it as, EAP, our programs are offered right now out of 9 of our division schools, and they operate for the purpose of programming for children with identified needs. And then beyond that, additional spaces are opened up to the public on a fee-paying basis. They do run 4 mornings or 4 afternoons, Monday through Thursday, and I'll talk a little bit more about the program hour requirements as we go through here. Programming for children accessing program unit funding, or PUF, the PUF grants that I'll talk to a little bit more in a minute, for severe delay or moderate language delay must meet the minimum hour requirements of directed teacher instruction per year. So our programs are offering 400 hours right now because that's the minimum hour requirement for 4-year-olds. Typically, we have the majority of 4-year-olds in our program. Children accessing mild moderate supports, as well as children eligible for ESL supports, are required to have 475. So there's a little bit of planning, juggling that has to happen between different groups of children accessing our program. And you'll see that in our program with a target time that we offer. It's 30 minutes, addition to the 2-hour 45 minutes for children receiving supports for mild, moderate, or ESL funding, where they work in a targeted group with staff towards their goals. In general, children enter our EAP programs if they turn 4 prior to December 31st, and if they are 3 prior to December 1st with an identified moderate delay or severe delay. If space and resources are available, we will extend that further to 3-year-olds in fee-paying spaces. We just limit the number of those spaces for 3-year-olds coming in, and we first open up registration to 4-year-olds. You bet.
There will be a test after. Yeah, I think just to do a little sidebar for the board, when I'm ever asked questions by Cheryl about early education, program unit funding, kindergarten coding, program hours allocations, it is so very complex. And I think Rochelle's already doing justice and just sharing the facts. And I actually told her to take away a few slides because I said, no, that's getting too detailed. But it really is a very complicated portfolio. And just want to share with you all, this gives you an idea of the molecular of the management of what has to happen in each of the coordinator roles, given various mandates, laws, pressures, funding, right? So just to put that out there for you all.
Lots of information in the funding manual and the special coding criteria documents to ensure that we're providing the programming that we need to support our littles. Moving on to the next slide. Our early education programs are capped at 20. We don't always sit at 20. Sometimes we need to look at the needs in the classroom and obviously registration interest as well. We aim to have approximately 60% of the class in funded spaces. So that means 60% of the children would be accessing supports for either PUF severe, PUF moderate, mild to moderate, or ESL. With the remaining spaces, those would be those fee-paying spaces that I mentioned that open to the public. Okay, we initially start with those 20 spaces, 7 of them being held essentially for children that would meet criteria for PUF, 5 of them being held for children that would meet criteria for mild to moderate to ESL. But we know it never happens exactly the way that you plan. And we meet children, we bring children in to best support their needs. And sometimes the picture looks quite different depending on the location and the children in the program. Alberta Education requires that Alberta Certified Teacher takes that lead role in providing the programming. So our programs are run, the day-to-day running of our programs, by an early learning educator. And they most often have a 2-year ECE diploma. So they're not certified teachers. And so that's where our early learning LSTs as itinerant staff go between schools supporting families and children who are accessing funding and supports under Alberta Education. Moving over to kindergarten, just a little bit of information for you. The requirement for minimum hours in kindergarten are 475. I just love the pictures. 475 hours of programming per year. Kindergarten programming must be taught by a certified teacher, and that's what you see in our programs. And just a note here that Alberta Education does conduct a verification process for all children in EAP and kindergarten that are identified to access supports with codes 41 to 48. And what that looked like this year was all first-year children in EAP and kindergarten that had a code 48 or a code 42. 42 is social emotional behavioral. 48 is a moderate language code. They were all polled in terms of verification, and then 20% of the remaining 40 codes, a random sample. And so our role was to then provide Alberta Education with that documentation. So it could have been medical diagnosis, speech language assessment, for example, their ISP, their instructional support plan that really paints the picture of what does that look like in the classroom for this child? What supports are they accessing in order to access programming for 3, 4, or 5-year-olds. And with that, we also had to verify the hours that we were providing teacher-directed instruction. There will not be a test on this one. This can all be found in the special education coding criteria. And I know there are a lot of words on the screen. I won't be reading through them all, but essentially it breaks down those severe codes or mild to moderate code in kindergarten and EAP. So when we look at the codes 41 to 46, just to give you a sense, more often we're seeing children identified for Alberta education purposes with a code 44, which is that physical medical, because there's a medical diagnosis. Sometimes we see a child that has been identified with a code 45 or 46, which is blindness or deafness. And then code 42, which I mentioned, which is that emotional behavioral disability. And then most often, we're looking at the specific codes to EAP in kindergarten, and that would be code 47 for a severe delay in language. And the severe delay in language is really looking at the overall language skills of a child. And it's a standardized assessment where children are showing that they're falling in that first or second percentile. Okay. With that, we also need to demonstrate that there is an impact in them accessing their programming and they're requiring those additional supports. When we look at the moderate delay in language, this is a new code that was put into place 2 years ago for children that are showing that moderate language delay. And it's recognizing that they, of course, need some additional supports as well, but the delay is not as severe in nature. So the same type of standardized assessment, but they might be sitting more in that third to sixth percentile, for example, in expressive communication or receptive communication. And then we also support children who have mild to moderate speech and language delays. We would be looking at a code 30 assignment if they're falling in the 7th to 9th percentile. Now, some children might have a mild delay and be above the 9th percentile, and that doesn't mean in kindergarten above, they might not be accessing some supports, but for the purpose of coding under Alberta education, they would not be, we would not add a code 30 if they were above that 9th percentile. When we talk about funding specific to ECS, there are some grants, the Pre-K PUF grant and the Specialized Learning Support Kindergarten Severe Grant. These two grants are specific to children with a severe disability or a severe language delay, as I mentioned in the last slide. So here we're looking at children with codes 41 to 46 and code 47. And if we are counting in terms of the weighted moving average, it would generate for 41 to 46 about $15,000 per child and $10,000 per child for code 47. The Pre-K Moderate PUF grant and the Kindergarten Moderate PUF grant, that's the only time we refer to PUF in kindergarten at this point, otherwise it's Kindergarten Severe. That is the new code that I mentioned previously, and children with a moderate language delay generate in that count towards the weighted moving average $4,000 per child. And then we also offer supports, particularly in early education in terms of access to program for pre-K, mild to moderate funding and ESL funding. And so those would be those supported spaces too for 4-year-olds, okay? With all of that, we have our budgets. So in terms of our early education program budgets, that's looking at the base instruction for funded children and pre-K PUF grants, both the moderate and the severe PUF, and fees from fee-paying spaces. And so what that would cover in terms of our early education programs would be the early learning educator, the learning support teachers that coordinate programming, educational assistants, early childhood coordinator, support services such as, they're all listed there, but you can see that we bring in those supports directly into our programs. And school supply, secretarial allotment, specialized materials equipment as needed, and professional learning and training. So it's a large list there. When we turn to the kindergarten severe budget, smaller list, but that's because we're looking specifically at kindergarten severe. Right? So the SLS grant for children that are meeting criteria for severe delay. So here we're looking at providing some speech language pathology support, specialized equipment, professional learning and training, and then the bulk of that really does go to educational assistance to support children eligible for kindergarten severe supports and programming. So just a note that there's no longer a mild moderate EA assigned to kindergarten programs. So typically, if you're in our kindergarten programs and you see educational support, it is because there are children in that program that meet criteria for kindergarten severe support. No additional funds are received for new children identified after the December 1st deadline. So we've got some timelines in terms of assessment and identification each fall. ECS age of eligibility in the funding manual 22-23, there is a chart that really outlines age of eligibility for ECS children. So a child cannot access more than a maximum of 2 years PUF in pre-K. So that's your 3-year-old year of EAP and your 4-year-old year of EAP. A child cannot access more than 3 years of moderate or severe disability funding prior to grade 1. So again, 2 years of EAP, 1 year of kindergarten. And so sometimes when we have children with those fall birthdays, where they could be the correct age for either 4 turning 5 in the fall entering kindergarten or 5 turning 6 entering kindergarten in the fall, we just have conversations with families around the trajectory. When would they like their child to enter kindergarten? And that will help determine when they're entering each program. Okay. A child cannot access more than 2 years of funding prior to grade 1 if they're accessing mild to moderate or ESL support, and that does include the kindergarten year. So that's just showing those mild, moderate ESL supports in EAP are for 4-year-olds. It's the year prior to kindergarten. This just paints a little bit of a picture of children that we have coming back into programming next year, just to give you a sense of our numbers in EAP. We currently have approximately 243 children registered in EAP. 143 of those children are in funded spaces. So last year, we had 36 returning children with 30 in funded spaces. So that means we had 36 3-year-olds that were then going to come back as a 4-year-old into their second year of EAP. This year, it looks like we'll have 64 potentially coming from a 3-year-old space into their second year of EAP. And of that, 44 would potentially be in a funded space. So it just gives you a sense that even though our enrollment numbers are a little bit lower than what they have been previously, we have had an increase in funded spaces across EAP and kindergarten this year. And looking at our 3-year-olds going into those 4-year-old spaces, we're higher in numbers this year for registered children. And lastly, in planning ahead for 23, 24, just some considerations as we start to work through the information and determine, where we can have programs and what those program structures will look like. We always like to consider those fee-paying spaces. There are subsidies now for licensed programs that I believe have impacted the number of children we have accessing our programs in fee-paying spaces, because our monthly fee of $200 is more than what a family that qualifies for subsidy would be paying either in daycare or in a private preschool setting. So certainly that has impact. But with that being said, we have a lot of interest from families to either be in a catchment school. Though we don't offer programs at all of our elementary schools, we know that it does catch many children prior to kindergarten in their home school. Or a school close to their home. It also, I think, speaks to the family's value on our programming, knowing that our play-based language enriched programming is a strong starter for their children. And so we definitely still have interest, though I know that it can be challenging just with regards to the fees. So by having those fee-paying spaces, which we always have, I believe, the children in the fee-paying spaces are developing as expected for their age in most cases, and they act as role models for children that might have an identified developmental delay. So that is one major benefit of having some spaces available for the general public fee-paying. It also helps us in identifying children meeting criteria for supports in programming. And this year, more than I would say any year, we're really noticing that, because families may not have expressed a concern around the development of their child, but once they enter programming in the fall and they're with their peers, we may have noticed that they might have an area of delay that we can support in programming, and they would qualify for supports. This year, we had many children move from fee-paying spaces, not just to mild to moderate spaces, but to our PUF spaces. And those were children that we may not have known about had they not shown up in programming come September. So another benefit of having those fee-paying spaces available when we can. Another benefit is children move into our division kindergarten program. So ideally, if parents are looking or families are looking for their children to enter an early education program, we would love to have them in our program and they can continue on their journey with Lethbridge School Division. Another consideration are the registration dates and timelines. We do a lot in the spring in preparation for the fall, particularly with identification and ensuring we have the right assessments in place to secure children in those funded spaces. If we relied on all of that to happen in September, October, November, it wouldn't be manageable. We already have our speech language pathologist, for an example, doing a number of assessments in EAP in kindergarten in September as a priority. So children that we're aware of, and we've been able to do a bit of a pop-in or a screen. We've been able to gather ages and stages questionnaire information on the domains of development. We bring in for a spring assessment. And then we have all of that information to then confirm with families too that they can be placed in a funded space. And for some families, that's the decision on whether or not they're able to attend EAP. So the timeline in the spring is quite important. And I know sometimes that can be challenging because we're waiting on a lot of pieces to determine when and where and how many programs we can have. So we're in the process of just being prepared for all of that and ready to go whenever we can. The other consideration for registration, just for timelines, I should say, and those spring assessments. Right now in the funding manual, September 30th is actually the cutoff for all codes to be identified with Alberta Education. But due to pandemic and access, Alberta Education has extended moderate and severe to December 1st. September 30th would be quite challenging, right? So we're thankful for that. But just a note that it could be a possibility. Program needs is the huge consideration here. When we can have our programs spread out, we certainly have, as I said, in terms of our structure and configuration, many children accessing supports. The less programs we have would mean the more children in each program that are requiring those supports. And on paper, sometimes that looks great, but in reality, we're working with 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. And when we do cluster for supports as appropriate, and if a child has a severe speech language delay, for example, in kindergarten programming, they would be clustered for supports with other children in that program that are working on similar goals. And we do that in EAP as well. The difficulty that can come into play in all of our programs, but I'm particularly going to look at one of our programs, for example, are our 3-year-olds that are coming into programming with more complex needs. So we have 3-year-olds, and I believe it is increasing in terms of who we're seeing coming into our program, already having diagnoses in place and some great supports already wrapped around them. But we have 3-year-olds that might have feeding needs, could be tube feeding, could be spoon feeding. We have 3- and 4-year-olds that have diapering needs. We have 3- and 4-year-olds that have quite extensive sensory needs. And these are children also that might be at a 9-month to 12-month in terms of their language development. And when you're at 9 months to 12 months in terms of your language development, you know that that's also going to look similar in their play, in their interactions, in their safety, right? In programming. So some of our programs, even though we cluster for support, need an extensive amount of support just based on the needs of that program. Also in our programs, as I said, we might have 7 spaces set aside for PUF this year. One of our programs is almost entirely funded. Every space that children are in that program are in a funded space. And those are children that registered, many in fee-paying spaces, but thankfully, we're able to put those supports in place and offer them their programming year with supports. And another program, for example, we're up to about 9 or 10 children accessing PUF in the program. And then we also have our children accessing mild moderate, ESL, and a few fee paying in the mix. So just a consideration as we're planning, ensuring that our resources are enough that we're prepared for whichever children come into our program and how to best support them. Another piece, before I just end with where the resources are, kindergarten needs this school year look a little bit different than they might have had previously, just in terms of exposures and experiences that kids have had over the last few years. They're different than children may have had 4 years ago. And so our children that have come to early education, they had potentially 2 years of intervention if they're requiring supports, or just that exposure to that group setting and interaction and play with peers. And so some of the children and consults that I'm having with schools right now are really on new children that we haven't met before, right? They've just come to kindergarten for the first time, and they haven't necessarily been in an opportunity where they've been with peers, or at least same age peers. It might be their younger sibling at home the last few years. And they might not have been accessing some of those outside resources that we typically may have seen children accessing. So just another piece that really shows the benefit of our planning for early education is that it gives those opportunities for children to build their executive functioning skills, their self-regulation skills, and those social skills that really set them up for success in kindergarten as well. And then that last slide there is really just showing the resources. So all of the details that I spoke about this afternoon are coming directly from the 22-23 funding manual or the special education coding criteria. And I think that's the quick, short overview of EAP and kindergarten.
Now for the test.
It's so evident that Rochelle studied under the tutelage of Isabel Plomp. You really have taken this portfolio and continued to champion it and worked through some really significant financial shifts in programming. And as well, just to add, as Rochelle explored and spoke about EAP and kindergarten, and some of the challenges of having these new students come in who have had very limited exposure at times due to the pandemic. We see that also in grade 1. Never before have we had so many students in grade 1 show up who didn't attend kindergarten because, as we know, EAP and kindergarten are not mandatory. And so that's another piece that champions what we do in EAP and kindergarten in really building those skills for kids to become strong learners, right? So thanks for presenting, Rochelle.
Yes, thank you very much for presenting. I'm guessing we have some questions, maybe. Christina, you have one? No?
Sure. I always have a list, but I don't know what is appropriate to ask because great. Thank you. Presentation. Fabulous. I always love to see how the puzzle is put together of the math of social services and of education is always very interesting. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and giving me lots of food for thought as we go into our strategic planning. So I appreciate that as well. I'm curious if you, from your experience in your time in this program, can you share some of the changes you've seen in how the criteria for supports has changed your registration or changed, families' access? So you had only 7th to 9th percentile could access the mild to moderate. Is that correct? And then it used to be to 16%. Can you just explain the impact you've seen of that change?
You bet. Off the top of my head, there have been some changes over the years. I would say in the last few years, there haven't been significant changes. The funding piece of it looks similar, and so do the coding criteria. This year, in terms of coding criteria, Alberta Education did make some slight changes with what they are accepting for documentation for a code 48 and a 42. And that was because of access during pandemic. Now, for us, we really are doing things similarly. We didn't change what we were doing in terms of documentation, but I could see in some school divisions or rural areas that could definitely have been beneficial. We're very fortunate that we have a large division team that we were able to still maintain the assessments that we typically would be doing for those codes anyway. So that was one of the changes. With that, they added the code 48, right? And that moderate language delay wasn't in the coding criteria prior to 2 years ago. So that is a change. Over the years, there have been some changes, certainly, that we've noticed. One of the largest, I would say, is the funding that was generated for family-oriented programming a number of years ago. We put a lot of work in really providing programming for families, children, and staff to come together and really teach and learn about the strategies to support children across home and school. And when we did surveys around that and spoke with parents directly, that was a huge benefit. It came out on the top in terms of something they really valued in that relationship between home and school. So that piece did generate funds for our programs and our kids to operate the FOPs, for staff to do that. And so I would say of everything, that's probably the biggest shift. It's not that we can't offer those things anymore, right? We can. It just looks different in terms of not part of that funding structure. The other piece is just the funding structure itself, and we're still learning what that looks like and what that means. It's the weighted moving average. Prior to 2 years ago, with PUF, we would submit a spreadsheet with each child's information and hours of instruction. And we actually had at one point, I believe, until February 1st as a second poll. So we had a little bit longer time frame, and we generated funds specific to the number for that year up to February 1st. So now it just looks different in how those pieces are allocated, right? The funding is there, it's just allocated in a different funding structure. And for us in the EAP world, it's just, and kindergarten world, around these severe supports and PUF grants, it's figuring out what that looks like from year to year to support the current children in the school year. Is that fair enough, Morgan? Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Mike.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up to make sure some clarification on the WMA and my understanding of it? So code 41 to 46 and code 47, you, in the presentation, you said 10,000 to 15,000 per student. Do we get that amount of money per student, or is that weighted moving average now? And you've just sort of done the calculations to say that's what it works out to per child. So I guess my question is, are supports for kids with, you know, code 41, 46, 47, are those kiddos getting specific dollars from the government, or is it weighted moving average so not every kid gets funded? If you could just clarify that for us, that'd be awesome.
In the funding manual outlines that amount for each child that is identified, but my understanding is that's based on the count in the weighted moving average. So that's the difference from a few years ago, where we would list each child for that year up to February 1st. And now it's the count, I believe, Mike, of the weighted moving average, and then that's the dollar that gets assigned.
Yeah.
You are
Does that
correct.
make sense?
Yeah.
Weighted moving
Yeah,
average.
it makes total sense to me. So if I'm correct, that means less funding for those kiddos.
For me, it means that it might not align directly with the number of kids that we have for the current year.
Just remember to use your mic. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
And I think the big shift, if we just want to keep things quite simple before pre 2 years ago to now, is once upon a time, a student who was identified with PUF coding, like a severe code, equaled typically an EA, right? That was sort of the mindset. And so now we're not even looking at an EA equaling a student with severe needs. We have to cluster that financially to make it sustainable. We cannot have one EA and one student one-on-one. Typically, I mean, Rochelle does a masterful job of making sure students who have needs get the needs met in the appropriate way. But I think that old mindset of a PUF student equals direct EA service and support, and that's their EA, is no longer what we can do in the staffing and funding that we're allocated.
Jenny?
The clustering, does it happen at the division level or at the school level? So if you have a child coded, does that $15,000 or $10,000 go directly to that school budget? Or is it done at the division where it's clustered, and then how does it work?
So that budget sits on my end and I make an allocation to the school. So typically when we're planning in the spring, I have a sense of which children are coming into programs, at least the children that we are aware of. And I have a sense of their support needs. And so we look at that overall picture and make decisions about what that level of support. And it would be similar when we're looking at supports across all grade levels too, right? We're looking at what level of support they're requiring for their needs, and that's when that clustering, I guess, ratio, if that's how you're looking at it, is determined, because we're ensuring that their children are getting what they need. I was just going to add on to Morig's comment there too, and when we talk about supports, and she mentioned educational assistance and the funding that's coming in, and just referring back to that one slide where I mentioned all of the levels of supports that are offered to children outside of EA supports, right? We have a whole team of physiotherapists, OT, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, behavioral support. We have music therapy coming into our programs. So supports are, we have a wealth of supports, and it might be educational assistance, but also a wealth of other additional specialists coming in and supporting our children.
Thank you. Andrea?
Thanks for sharing all of this information. I think I might be able to pass the test. I was pleased that the codes were coming off my pen as easily as they were, but I kept writing them down. I know you made note that there are no longer mild, moderate EAs in kindergarten classrooms. And as you visit them, are you finding that the classrooms are able to handle not having the traditional classroom EAs?
I think we're looking at what that programming environment looks like in kindergarten and what is developmentally appropriate for 5-year-olds and what might it look like now, even compared to 4 years ago, based on experience and exposures of children. So when we really look at that play-based environment and embedding literacy and numeracy into our programming, then I think we can we have some more flexibilities as children are learning those executive functioning skills, self-regulation skills coming into kindergarten. Does it look different? Yes. It does. Obviously, when you have another individual in the classroom, particularly in September, October, November, it looks different. We have young children coming in that are learning to navigate the structures and routines. But I think that we have lots of creative things happening in our programs to help support that. And when you can adjust in terms of that play-based programming and flexibilities and all of the great strategies that we have, it does make a difference with our young ones.
Andrea, you're good?
And I was just going to see if there's a configuration in a classroom that needs extra support, is that able to be granted, even if they don't have, say, a tough child?
Yeah, and that's where I think we look at all of our supports. Jackie and I work quite closely together because there is the inclusive education team support in our schools, right? So I know partway through the fall, we worked quite closely at overall needs. And so there are some children that do not meet kindergarten severe, but they are requiring some additional types of supports. And what they require in September might look different than what they're requiring in January. And so they fall really in that, almost that team picture within a school that we look at for all children. And so that's the lens that we approach it with, but we work together quite closely so that we can address those concerns as they come up. And then outside of just, like I said, educational assistance, we have behavior support team going into schools and offering some supports, as well as our psychologists and our division support team with OT and SLP working consultatively to really try to offer strategies in hopes that we can support the best that we can.
Thank you. Jenny?
Sorry, to follow up my previous question, I was just understanding the funding. The funding when you're clustering it and allocating it, is it used mostly for staffing help, or is it also, is that where if you need equipment or if you need resources, does it also come out of that 10 or $15,000 that is?
Yeah, all of that comes out of that funding. So if there's specialized equipment for a child, for example, then it would come out of the same budget. Staffing is obviously the largest piece of that. Now, sometimes if it's highly specialized equipment, depending on what the family is accessing with outside resources, it doesn't mean that we always are purchasing those items, but sometimes we do have to look at purchasing. And when we do that, hopefully we try to look at that longevity too, right? If it's something that can be used for other children down the road or be used between grade levels too as required. But ideally, it is targeted for PUF in that sense when we do the purchasing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions. I want to thank you for coming and providing us with the information. You clearly know and understand the program, and I think that we're in good hands knowing that you're responsible for this area for our division, and I'm sure we'll have future questions that we know where to go to get some answers. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all of your support of Early Learning.
Thank you. Right. So now we'll jump back to the calendar of events. Everybody a minute to pull that up. And Kristen's already on it. She's got that up on the screen for us. So
No.
I have a couple of questions. I see on here that policy advisory is on here twice, both on March 2nd and March 8th.
March 2nd is incorrect.
Incorrect. Okay, so it's not on that day. Okay. And then Division School Council says it starts at 6. My understanding was that we bumped them to 6:30.
Yes, let's see. 6:30 is the learning and then the regular meeting at 7.
Okay, sounds good. For March 15th, could you put ASBA zone meeting? Just so that trustees are clear and you guys all receive that information if you wish to join that meeting. And then I would also like, and I don't know exactly the title of it, but we as a board on March 3rd will be attending the French flag raising. So Cheryl, can you just clarify what the exact title of it is? Or not? We can make sure that that's on there. It doesn't rattle off the top of my
Doesn't rattle off the top of my head.
Perfect. Okay,
but it's
we're on the same board there.
Yeah.
But the board will be attending the
Right,
at City
we've built
Hall.
that into the Franco. It's in our board agenda actually. There, I can find it.
Okay, Cheryl will tell us.
Franco Albertan, but it's Albertan.
Yes.
AIN for Albertan. Flag raising at City Hall, and that is 9:45 to 10:45 on Friday. And again, our French immersion students will be there.
Excellent. It'll be great for us to, as a board and executive, to be there amongst our French immersion students in our division and showing our support for the French immersion program within our division. So are there other pieces that, Christine?
We also have our Poverty Intervention Committee meeting on March the 7th from 1 till 3.
Perfect. And Jenny?
Just to add a time for the Community Engagement Committee meeting, I think, I gotta double check, did we say 7 for that one? Community Engagement Committee doesn't have a time.
7, yes.
It's 7 o'clock for that one.
That's the one on March 16th.
Yes, that's on the
Perfect.
16th. And do we have the ICE scholarship event on here? Oh, yep, there it is. That needs a time as well. 7 o'clock for that one as well, because we changed that.
Perfect. Oh. Excellent, thank you. So I think we're good with those changes, and that has us all in line as trustees, so we know where we're supposed to be. And next, we're going to move on to our policy review. We have 2 policies here, and is it Craig or Cheryl who's going to guide us?
We're looking at 502.3 and 605.1. Now, I just got some feedback on suspension and expulsions. And so I will direct you to 502.3, 1.2.5. Now, most of the changes that are in yellow have been because of the Education Act. So that we have to put it in our policy.
Right, so I know that this policy came before the board last meeting, and the board asked that it be brought back with clarity in terms of what is exactly from the Education Act and what is not. And so what I did is I went through and I highlighted in yellow. So anything that's in yellow is from the Education Act.
Now, the feedback that I received is about one word, and it does change the reading of the thing, and it might be worthwhile to take it back to our committee. In 1.2.5, it reads, parents, guardians, or independent students shall be informed in writing regarding the circumstance of a suspension and provided an opportunity to meet with the principal or administrative designate to discuss the reasonableness of the suspension. And really, I've got some feedback that word opens us up to a lot of questionable things, and it should just reasonableness. And really, they're there to discuss the circumstances of the suspension, not really the reasonable. We're assuming that if there's a suspension, it was reasonable by the teacher or the school, and that it's the circumstances that they would like to talk about. So if the board feels to leave that word in and we can pass it like that, or if they feel that it should go back to the policy policy advisory committee to discuss that word, I'm open to it. But that was what the feedback was given to me, that one word is kind of opens us up a little too much to parents coming in and talking about the reasonableness. Well, you could argue that forever, but the circumstances, that's a different thing. So I would just see what the committee would like to do.
I was going to say, yeah, the board can certainly make that revision at this meeting and it not go back to the committee. If the board collectively says, actually that's a better word and it makes sense, then you can make that and pass it with that revision.
Jenny?
That makes sense to me to make that change, because I think you're right. Reasonable, it can be arbitrary. Reason can be arbitrary.
Can I ask, what date did the policy committee gather on?
February meeting was canceled.
It was January.
So then my question is, if there was no policy meeting, where is the feedback coming from? And was it communicated to the committee why there was no meeting? I'm just wondering why there wasn't a meeting and how I appreciate and understand Cheryl's work on this and the highlighting, but where is the feedback coming from? I did have a stakeholder come to me concerned that the meeting was canceled without reasons given. So I just would appreciate understanding.
And I would also just like to make note that we do have motion from our previous meeting that it would go back to the committee, and that motion was made by yourself, Craig, and carried by the board. So I would like some follow-up in regards to that piece as well.
I think, if my memory serves me correctly, there were people missing in February that should have been at the committee meeting, and so that's why it was canceled. So obviously, if some people have raised concerns, I have no problem in taking it back to Policy Advisory Committee in March, whenever we meet. I can't remember when we're meeting, but we can take that back, and then people can get a little further. This came from one of the members on the committee that talked about that one word. But I'm open to it. If you've had concerns raised, and I think it would be well worth it to take it back to the policy committee.
I think at this time with us having that motion, unless you're going to look at changing that motion, I think that it should go back, and knowing that there is comments that people do want to have that opportunity, I think that it should go back before it comes to us again as a board. And I don't see urgency in terms of we need to pass this today versus it waiting another month.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And if the board is in favor of that, that's fine with me too. So if I see no other.
I'm seeing nods around the room that we're good for that to go
Okay.
back. We certainly appreciate the work that obviously we can see that a lot of work went into this to highlight the pieces that we had requested as a board. But I think for it to go back would be great.
And I appreciate Cheryl going through and making sure that everything in yellow was what the Education Act, because we have to follow the Education Act when we're doing policies. So that's that one. We'll move that back to the next meeting of the Policy Advisory. The other one is 605.1, inclusive learning supports. And you can go through, was this the one that was sort of the one that they sent the wrong one?
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, so that one wasn't a motion to go back to the policy committee. It was a motion to go back to the chair, who could certainly delegate to the superintendent to ensure the correct version of the policy came forward this month to the board, and you now have the correct version of the policy. Last meeting, it was the correct version, except the confusion was that the changes that had been done 3 years previous were in one color, and the changes that were done, which were very modest changes, as you can see here, that were done by the current policy committee, were in a different color. And so very confusing as to what were the changes for 2023 review of the policy by the policy committee. And so hopefully it's clear there for you, because I've ensured that the inclusive learning support 605.1 changes that you see, the track changes that you see, were what was done by this committee for this particular revision.
I would move that we pass policy 605.1, inclusive learning supports, as amended by the policy committee.
Okay, and I'll open it up for discussion. So I know I certainly have some discussion in regards to this. I appreciate it coming back. I think it looks great that it's the colors, and we can actually follow along, and we can refer back to what's actually in our books, which is great. My concern lies around the 2.1 section. Everything else I am good with. When I look at 2.1, a couple of key pieces that stick out for me is second sentence of that. In some situations, a student may be required. When we look at that a student may be required, I am concerned about where that requirement is coming from. Yeah, it's really small on the board. Yeah, 2.1. And then where it says to receive programming, and then when you look at the side where it says the piece that was deleted out, so what was deleted out is that transportation is provided if this is, in which case transportation is provided if this is necessary. So when I look at 2.1, there's a couple of concerns, the piece around the requirement, as well as they're receiving programming. And then we've actually taken out the piece that probably was the intent of having this statement there, that the transportation would be provided, or is that somewhere else within our policies in regards to transportation would be provided, and that it's clearly identified in other portions of our policy that parents would know, and it's referenced at the bottom. So Cheryl, go ahead.
Yeah.
Because this is complex and transportation isn't always required, I think we needed to take that, because certainly the provision of transportation is based on the funding manual, right? So if anything, we would refer to the funding manual in this policy because it's not necessarily the same year to year. And the reason we said other than neighborhood school and is required, so we don't have some programs in every school. So for example, if they're in one of Victoria Park's programs, that would be the only place that that program is. And so they'd be required to attend that program, to receive that programming. And what the reason we say alternate location is sometimes it's not even necessarily in a school. It might be in an alternate location. It might be the program that we run in collaboration with Lethbridge College. It might be in a program that we run outside of our school facilities. And so that's alternate location makes better sense than saying not the neighborhood school. And through alternate delivery structures, not even necessarily in a building. Right. So, for example, we have e-learning now, or we have other methods of delivery that isn't necessarily physically in a building. And so that provides that flexibility piece in terms of how we provide learning supports. Transportation, in which case transportation is provided, puts the division in a very difficult situation because that isn't always true. And so really, that's a funding question, and it's a funding transportation qualification question each year. So that would have to change every year, right? And it depends upon the program and the choices that are made regarding programming. And so transportation really doesn't make sense in this policy.
Okay. But when we have the word required in there, I have concern with that. And I see Morag putting her hand up. So I think that for me, it's the pieces of it all going together. And I think some rewording maybe.
Really appreciate the conversation. When we talk about required, we as a school division are required to provide a program for a student, right? Those programs are very diverse and very different. I'm working with 5 students who are currently on a situation where criminally they cannot come on campus, right? And so we are required to provide a form of programming for the students. Sometimes we have to provide choice of what that looks like, but they are required to have a program. And so when we say whenever possible, in some situations a student may be required to, they are required to have a program in a certain place, right? We have nothing else that we can provide for them, say in a brick and mortar setting. So that requirement, it is a strong word for sure. It sounds heavy, but I think at times it can be very confusing because some parents think they will always, as they have children, will always be able to access a brick and mortar setting, which is not the case, right? We are obligated to provide a program which can look like DL, it can look like online, it can look like whatever alternative program it might be. But again, it's based around other circumstances that make the decision sometimes quite complicated, right? So I don't know what other word I would use in that situation because there are times we have to require something, and it is heavy-handed, Allison, but it's in often when we're using that term requirement, it's through the lens of safety of the whole school population, and we are limited or bound by the decisions that are outside of the school that require us to provide a program of that nature.
So when I had looked at it, and I'm not the wordsmith person by any means, but I had looked at using words such as it may be necessary to meet the needs of the student, hearing now that it's not necessarily always about the needs of the student may be others. But yeah, I don't know that I sit comfortably with the word required in that area. Craig?
There was a lot of debate on that, I think, if I recall.
And in the Education Act.
But it's part of the Education Act, basically says that. And we know that sometimes things happen and that's going to have to happen. That's going to be the thing. I do appreciate your comment is that some students, it might be a way of accommodating their learning, and then others, it's beyond our control and we have to do that. So there was some really good debate on that question, and from all parts, like from the parent representative, from ATA, from the administrators. So We felt comfortable with what we put down there, and that, yes, and then that thing is that we don't have the money always for the transportation. And then if we left it in there, that would have to come from some form of funding, which would mean somebody else is losing out.
Mark.
And as I look at the really complicated programs I've recently been working with high schools on, the choice that we offer is a school choice. And so school choice policy states that transportation is on the parent's domain, right? So that was just a statement I wanted to share too.
And I think that there's a difference between school choice and we're using the word required. So.
And I think it's program choice, and sometimes we only have one choice, and it's a requirement. And so, yeah, it could be probably tidier, more tidy in how it's worded, but I will fall to the policy committee to determine what is best to do in that regard.
Christine.
Just reading through the minutes, this policy was also motion to go back to the policy advisory committee. So I would be supportive if this is a conversation that you feel needs to happen within the committee space for it to go back for when they meet.
I read that.
It was to go back to the committee chair.
Yeah.
That was because, unfortunately, our admin assistant got confused in the.
And that's why back to the chair to make sure you
Yeah.
got the right call.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments? Seeing none, the motion is on the floor to pass this motion as amended, pass this policy as amended. So those in favor and those opposed, Jenny, you need to vote. Okay, so one opposed. Yep. Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
If you want me to clarify, Jenny, you're not going to find a section of the Education Act that has this specifically. Where you'll find it is that we're required to provide a program to all children. That's where the word required comes from. You won't find inclusive learning supports in the Education Act as it's written here.
Can you use your mic, please? Thanks.
I was just looking up the listed reference for the Education Act. It says 11.4 section 11.4 number 43. So I was just looking up what that says because I'm trying to understand the concern with the word required, and if that wording comes directly from the Education Act, or what the wording. I just wanted to compare it to what the wording in the Act regarding this actually is.
You'll find required, yeah, and actually maybe it needs to be added here, but I can find that for you, Jenny, if you want to take a pause and I can find it before we move on, or I can
Sure,
find it
can we-
afterwards and send it to you.
Can I? I'm just trying to process the conversation. Is that okay if we pause on this? The vote? How do you do that? That's okay. I can vote on it.
Tyler?
We had a vote.
I would not like to pause on this. The motion was made, it was voted on and passed, so we need to move on. If she wants the information, she can get it later, and whoever wants to bring it back, that's fine, but at this point, we need to move forward.
Sounds good. So you can certainly gather more information and then in the future can bring it back to the table as well. So but the motion was carried. So moving on, next is division highlights. And I will just take note that we're close to 5 o'clock. So if we're not done our division highlights, I will stop whoever's at that point. So who would like to go first with division highlights? It's always a great opportunity for us to share a couple of exciting things in the division. Christina.
So I wanted to celebrate Carnaval at Fleetwood Bodden. It was so great. I missed the cabana sucre, like the maple syrup and the snow day. Unfortunately, I was very sad. It's my favorite part of Carnival. But I did get to go to pancake breakfast, and that was so great. I just want to appreciate the efforts made to create, that French culture in our school division, and really building up that experience of being in French immersion. As a former French immersion student, it's a very impactful experience for students, and I can really see the effort that goes into it. And yeah, just really appreciate it. From Mike Mountain Horse and Lakey, I actually just want to do a bit of a forecast. I just want to celebrate that Mike Mountain Horse has been working hard to bring a March, oh gosh, what's it called? Like Fitness Month to Mike Mountain Horse, and they're doing a different family fitness activity every week in March. So if you're engaged with that school, feel free to connect because it's going to be so fun. And Lakey has Oz with a Twist coming up March 9th and 10th. And I think tickets are running very low. So if you want to enjoy some more theater, I know Andrea's all about it. It's coming up. I also wanted to honor and celebrate Black History Month. I know lots of schools were doing lots of great things this month, and really moving forward the conversation on inclusion and celebration and acknowledgement of our Black families and our students and our staff. So just want to honor and appreciate that month, and call us all into accountability for continuing to move the conversation forward on anti-Black racism and how we can better support those students, families, and staff as well. And then I went to a conference on comprehensive school well-being, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of pieces that I took away because it was really meaningful for me. I'd just been learning a lot about school wellness from this group and from the wellness committee and from Moray. Just a real focus on what students and families are looking for. And so one sort of the big call out that I wanted to give to this group was that I got to attend a sort of leadership luncheon before the conference started with other trustees and other school leaders. And my biggest takeaway was that based on the research, observable leadership on wellness is one of the major the main factors about whether well-being programs and services are like actually implemented and integrated into schools. So we can say, till we're blue in the face, we want you to be well, and please do, our wellness programs. And if we as leaders are not engaging in that practice ourselves in our own, personal life, that it doesn't hold much weight, and that the research really demonstrates that. So I encourage all of us to consider how we might promote our own well-being, physical, spiritual, mental health, so that we can offer that leadership to our whole division. And so thank you to those who have demonstrable leadership in that area. And I encourage all of us to keep working on that. And then I think that's it. Yeah. So observable leadership. Drink some water in public or something. Go for a walk. There you go. Small goals, also the point of the conference.
Excellent. Thanks. And thank you for bringing back that information from the conference. Craig.
I've been able to, well, first of all, attended town hall, and then was able to watch McGrath versus LCI girls, the Senator Joyce Fairburn in their quarterfinals and semifinals, which Senator Joyce Fairburn then went to the finals and won, I think, if I serve my correctly. The 6 to 8 group, not the 9 group. The girls lost in the semifinals to Lakey. Very interesting as a trustee when two teams from Lethbridge are playing, you just sit there. You can't really cheer for anybody. Just sit there. And then I watched the LCI play Cardston boys, both games. I attended public school boards on the 9th and 10th. Values committee, which we'll talk about at retreat. And went on the General Stewart tour, which was quite nice, and enjoyed it. And that was it.
Excellent. Thank you. Christine. Okay.
I'll just mention a couple of things. Town hall was really great. It was really fantastic to have the gym filled again, and just hearing the perspectives from our stakeholders, our parents and our staff. And I just have to send a cheers out to our students. They are so well spoken. I sat with a few pretty incredible students that shared their perspectives and very different perspectives. But yeah, I think we need to, I know we need to harness the voices of our students more. And so even though I didn't attend the student symposium, that was one of my highlights, hearing about it and hearing about the success of it, and just the participation and the passion, and just knowing that students felt seen and heard. So that was a highlight for me to hear about that. And this morning I was able to attend Senator Buchanan's Courage Assembly, and just to witness students be acknowledged publicly for being masters, for belonging, for generosity and independence. And so that was a really great morning at Senator Buchanan today.
Thank you. Tyler?
Everyone will already pretty much cover what I get through, and I'll leave General Stewart for you. But the school tours were great. Who knew General Stewart had a second floor? Hey, I didn't know that. So you learn some things going to these that you can't even imagine where the second floor would be in General Stewart, but it's there. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. And Andrea, are you going to be, oh, it's 5 o'clock. So let's just do a quick check. Not seeing Kate. If anybody does come on, just let us know. And Andrea.
I got to go to the first ever literacy night at Lethbridge Christian, and Cheryl and Mike and I were there, and wow, it was just packed. They had booth upon booth in the gym with just so many wonderful stations that you could go to. We were the readers in the library, and I had to get my sea legs back a little bit. I was nervous about that, but anyway, we enjoyed it so much, and wonderful to see some of our Indigenous education group out there too. It was wonderful. And then the LCI dance. Wow, what can I say? I just love those programs so much. Nice to spot some of my kindergarten children now growing, dancing up there. That was wonderful. Emmanuel Christian Elementary School had a World Read Aloud Day, and we were so welcome there, and it was wonderful to see costumes, and they had refreshments. And because that school is identical to General Stewart, if I tucked myself into the same corner of a classroom, I felt so welcomed by those little grade ones to read with them. I was surprised at how nervous I was to read to children. Anyway, I even practiced ahead of time. So those were highlights. I went to all 3 of the school visits, and so I loved getting back into Proby again, and loved getting through LCI, and of course General Stewart, getting hugs from former students there. Seeing the Boost program in action was wonderful. Of course, I stayed later after school like old days and had lots of chats. And then I went to Inuit Day at Lakeview, and got to do Inuit games in the gym and see Inukshuks being made, and there were lots of parents there, and so that was wonderful. So and I also really enjoyed town hall, and I agree with you that hearing the voices of the young students was amazing. Like, you would think that this child was in grade 12, but really she was in grade 8. She had, so much to say. So it was wonderful to hear their voices. So thank you.
And Jenny.
My daughter is in 5th grade, and she's going on the ski trip on this coming Thursday. And it reminded me, as I was helping her get ready for it, it reminded me of when I was in 6th grade, and that was the first time I had ever gone skiing. And it was the last time I went skiing until I was an adult, because it just wasn't something my family was able to do. And as I got her ready for this, I remembered how important that was to me. And I reflected this week on how much, and so what I want to highlight is the amount of effort and energy and time that our teachers and our administrators put into the things that they do outside of hours of school. And just thinking on this last month, all the basketball games I've been to, and the plays, and the LCI dance show, and I've been to a few middle school plays, and sporting events and different things, and even just the parent councils. Those are after hours. All these things that our staff are putting in for our students, and to see the confidence and the opportunity that it gives our students that goes beyond just the basic academics, and how important that is for them in their learning experience and in their growth. And so I just wanted to highlight, even we've mentioned town hall, even just having so many of our administrators and teachers there, and these students that were inspired to come and given the confidence to share, and they shared boldly, some of them. And it was just so neat to hear their voice, and to see them validated around a table, and to see their confidence grow in that experience. And so I just wanted to highlight that extra effort and how important it is, and that I think it really is making a big difference in our school environments and in our students' learning experiences.
Thank you. For me, I have a couple of highlights. One for the town hall. I always enjoy going to town hall and having those conversations. For me, this was the first time I was on the other side. So it was great to be able to go and meet with people at the various tables, and to hear the different conversations at each of those tables was great, and just to continue those relationships that some people haven't seen each other in person. So that was wonderful. We did get to go on the LCI tour, and on that tour, one of the things that I found was fabulous is we walked into the dance academy, and they were able to break into a dance for us, and it was just amazing for them to just on the spot, boom, and they put and the smiles on those kids' faces, and they just the heart that they put into it. So that was wonderful. And then jumping to a whole different world is I was able to actually watch our LCI Samurais up in Edmonton at the esports competition. They were one of the youngest competing teams, and you can certainly go on to our Facebook page, and I've posted a couple of pictures on there. And it was, as much as you sit in there and think that teenagers are sitting in a basement playing a video game, that is not what this is at all. Like, it is hard competition. The room was packed. Like, think of a big, like, it was in Edmonton at the Expo Center. So the whole room was packed full of people cheering on these kids playing video games up on a stage. And it was just amazing to see these LCI Samurais up there competing to their heart's content. It was definitely the first opportunity that they've had to compete in this nature, and it was just for me, it was a highlight to see our the staff that joined along with them, and just the proudness of our LCI team to be up there. So that was amazing. And then just the other piece I'd like to highlight is this past week when we were on our reading week break. It actually provided lots of opportunity where some of our staff had more opportunity. We were out in the community during daytime hours, and I was able to run into a number of them and have some really great engaging conversations. And so it was, I think for me, it was a highlight to be able to have conversations with staff in different environments when they were on their week break. And those were some wonderful conversations that I had. So those are my highlights. Christina, go ahead.
Thank you for re-mentioning the student forum. I can't believe it happened in February. February was so full for having a week of school. So I do just want to take a second to highlight the student forum, just because it was so special, and I just really want to appreciate all of the work that went into it. It was an enormous amount of coordination, and so great. And I just want to share with the board some of the takeaways that I heard from students, because I did have the privilege to get to be there. So some of the takeaways that I had were, one of the good questions was, what do you want to learn about wellness? And my heart is still just thinking about this kid. It was like, I just want to be a good human. Can you teach me that? And I was like, oh, just me crying the entire day. Don't worry. I did do honors. When we were talking about racism and oppression, they were so open and ready to speak about it in respectful ways with one another. And at very diverse tables. Like every table was very deliberately designed for different grade levels, different schools, different experiences, and very well facilitated. And all the students honestly did an incredible job of calling each other to have a conversation. Like, I see that you haven't spoken. Can we let that person speak? I think I'm speaking a little bit too much, or this question doesn't apply as much to me. Can someone else go? Right. And it was so generous of them. They did such a great job. And they spoke a lot about how racism at school really escalates through social acceptance that's promoted through jokes and through social media. It was what stood out for them a lot was how it just keeps escalating through the like sort of social networks that they're that happen in schools and in out of school centers and things like this. They talked a lot about having more places to express student voice. They want like open mics, open houses, assemblies, group discussion, and lots of other forms of expression. They made a big list of all the things that they would love to come and speak at, which is great. So anytime if you're in committees and things and places where student voice might be appropriate, they would like to speak to you. So don't hesitate. And finally, as folks who should be listening to student voice, and I know that we make every effort to do so, they want to know that if they've shared a concern, that we have what have we done with it, right? So making sure that we own some accountability about if we're being informed by student voice, that we reply to student voice. So I would encourage us, when we think about things like the strategic planning, how do we communicate that back? Because it will be informed by student voice. So what can we do to ensure that we're not just sharing to parents and teachers and staff, but also to students? So, and in general, they rock and they're super kind and they're all awesome. So great job.
Thanks for sharing that. And Morag, when you were talking about the poster, I had meant to say, and I'll say it now, are you able to bring that along to when we have our strategic planning, just so that we can reference it? Go ahead.
I want to make sure that what was represented on that poster is not the only thing we use to inform our decisions, right? And so I really want us to look at, like for town hall, if we were to just take 12 voices and put them on a piece of paper, it really wouldn't give you all of the data. So I just want to make sure when we are considering data and even considering what's shared in that poster, that it's accurate according to what's been recorded. So I have a second meeting with the leadership team, including Christina, to really determine process and how we're going to share out the data. And I guess the question is, when will you get the data so that you can consider these things? And so as a preliminary, sure, we can take the poster along, but just be mindful that there's up 10 pages more of answering 16 questions, some quick and short snappers, and then 8 that required 10 to 15 minutes of dialogue at each table. That's a very quick snapshot, not really an accurate full representation of the feedback that we received.
Nope, that's totally fair. I think it's just having that visual as that reminder. Yep. Excellent. It's on the website. Yep.
We just finished a video today. Garrett did a great job. There were, I believe, 8 students, Garrett, you interviewed around the division that attended, and sort of a summary of where we're going next to share out to kids, students, young people. Because as Christina mentioned, I think the worst thing that we could do is get all this great feedback and do nothing with it and not inform those that shared that feedback where we go next. And so what we're planning on doing is developing a 3-year plan, actually, because the feedback we received was so very valuable and very actionable, both short-term and long-term. And so the group of folks that we're going to all sit with will be developing, well, whether it's admin committee, yourselves, and the group that developed this wellness committee, those that have been involved in the pre-planning, will be solicited in developing a process moving forward through the next 3 years. So that's just so you know where we're going. And please check the share on our website around sort of the outcomes and where we're going from here. And if you have any young people who participated that you know, please let them know, and we'll be sharing this out through our wellness group who chaired the tables to share out to the students who were participating in the event so that they know that we're continuing this process.
Thank you. And next is our community conversations. So the date is there. Our next one is on March 7th. So next week from 1:30 to 3 on the south side at the Fish and Game Association. So thank you for arranging that, Christine. And Craig's going to be there opening the door for us. So thank you. Perfect. And next, I'm going to make sure that I get this correct. So 11.2 is going to be Community Engagement Committee. Jenny, okay, go ahead.
So I just wanted to pull this one out just because I think it's worth trustees taking a minute to look over it. But since we've pulled it out, I'll also, because it's in the report, just mention the ICE scholarship too. So it is in your agenda. It's section 2.2 if you want to look at it. But the ICE scholarship event, I've mentioned in the past, we've made a shift. We're hosting a gala, and we're excited to host that over at Chinook in their theater. And that will be March 9th from 7 to 8. And so I just wanted to mention that because I encourage all to attend if they're able to. So that's open to everyone. We've invited everyone, not just us, but everyone. So we're excited about that. But I just wanted to pull this out because and speak to it specifically because Garrett put a lot of work and effort, and parents put time and effort into responding to our communication survey. And I think that's worth us just going over. So there is a link if you're wanting to look at it. There's a link. I had asked for it to be included in here, but it was too many pages. So if you want to look at it, I think it's only 14 pages, so you can look at it, but she's got it up here too. So we had 473 responses, and so there was a good engagement on this. And the overall themes that we saw was that most people are accessing information very heavily. The feedback was by email. And the questions were specifically not about the classrooms, but the schools and division, information coming from schools and from division. And for each of the ways we asked those questions, the overwhelming feedback was often email there. But it's interesting and worth noting because when we got into asking them, how do you prefer to receive information, it was a different dialogue. So then we had, just scroll down farther, sorry, to the preferred. So this is again, we receive it by email, but go back up, sorry. We don't like receiving it by email. We prefer to receive it by newsletter. And so that was a conversation the Community Engagement Committee thought is important because everyone's getting it by email, but not everybody wants to. And so just something to be aware of and for us to be thoughtful and reflective on in how effective we're being in getting information out and how it's being received. And then we asked, thank you, Kristen. Do you mind scrolling down? We're going to go into the data for the website. And so, sorry, you can go back up to that one. Thank you. So this was people's overall experience with the website. And the generalized feedback for the website is that information is not, we have, is that say 30%, they don't feel the information is easy to find on our website. And so that's something we've talked about is accessibility to information on there as well. And then we got into, can I scroll down again there, Kristen? Let's scroll down again here. So one of our takeaways was Garrett said, I've been sending out emails in the afternoons or in the evening. And now knowing this, we're going to make a change and send out emails in the mornings. People prefer them in the morning. And so really valuable feedback here. Some of the other feedback was around the calendar. Specific comments were put in about, hey, it's really hard to find the division calendar. And so one of our thoughts was, actually, this one's good. Let's go back up to that one first. Sorry. Another one of our big takeaways was not everybody, 80% of people are accessing the website on their phones. And so one of our other takeaways is we need to make the the digital format of our website, maybe improve that, because that might be some of the difficulty that people are having a hard time finding information. It could be because they're doing it on their phone rather than an actual desktop. And so that's another one of our takeaways from that we recognize as an area for improvement. And then we'll just scroll back down to that next one. Thank you, Kristen. So some of the comments were the calendar, that it's difficult to find. Everybody loves to know, when they can schedule things and have that easily accessible to them. And so one of our thoughts was that maybe our individual school websites could have a clear link to the district calendar, was something that we had made note of. Another concern was the search engine on our website. And so one of the things we talked about is working with our website provider and making some improvements to the way that information is accessed and can be searched and can be found. There was also a feedback that parents prefer not to have downloadable things in the emails that they receive from the schools, that if we can streamline that might help with getting information out more effectively. And there was some mention of a desire for paper and a mention of a request for no more additional sources for looking for information, that there's a lot of things that are out there that are helpful. And so what we have is good. And I just thought it was worth looking at and recognizing that feedback and being reflective in how we move forward in presenting information and strive for effective communication. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for
Thank you.
Jenny? Craig?
Well, I would just say I would concur with some of the parents, especially when you type in something to find in Lethbridge Public. That search engine gives you a whole bunch of stuff that's not even close to Lethbridge Public. And so that's really a problem.
Thank you. Christina?
I just wanted to appreciate Garrett for putting the survey out, making the fancy survey sheet and all of the work that goes into communications. I think what this also demonstrates is like how many ways we're trying to reach families. And so I don't understand how Garrett is one person. So thank you very much. And I look forward, I'm just really pleased how many people responded. So I'm hopeful that this helps us as a board as well, think about how we want to reach folks with our information.
Jenny?
Sorry, just along those lines, Christina, I hope that our shareholders, because we often hear, I didn't know about that. Or, there's always, no matter how many times we try to broadcast it and how many ways we sometimes can't get it out there, but this is something that is an action that's been taken and is evidence that we are striving to get our communication out there effectively, and that matters to us. And so, yes, Garrett, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate that need, and we're hearing that and striving to work toward that. Garrett, really quick, can you tell, how do we find this on the website? Just community engagement website. That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Jenny, for bringing it forward for us, to pulling it out of the consent agenda and just highlighting it so that all trustees had an opportunity to see it. So thank you. Next is 11.3, which I believe is the kindergarten subcommittee. Christine?
Yes, so in the fall, we created a full-time kindergarten subcommittee to present at the ASBA FGM. And we were for full-time, fully funded with new funds kindergarten. We were unsuccessful in our first attempt, but during the FGM, we knew that we were going to continue with this endeavor. Our intent was to go to the ASBA SGM and again put forward a motion for with new funds fully fund full-time kindergarten. So we set a meeting for January 23rd to begin this work. Prior to the meeting, I connected with Shali Bazuk, the VP of ASBA, just to talk about deadlines, etc. and was told that any motion brought forward at SGM is considered emergent. And so as a committee, we determined very quickly that this is not an emergent issue and we would be more successful if we were to bring it into the fall. So that was a very brief meeting. We will hopefully be meeting near the end of March, beginning of April to begin the next process. Last year, for FGM proposals, they're typically done by the end of May. And so we will come together to do our work, see what additional information we feel is best to provide. Then we will take it to zone for approval as zone, and then as that's approved, then zone can put it forward to ASPA. So that's where we're at.
Questions for Christine? So just in regards to dates, so May 17th is the zone meeting that it needs to be approved by the zone. And one piece that I would ask that maybe you move up your meeting till March, because boards want to be able to have opportunity to talk to their own boards. So if all zone boards could have it by the end of March, then at their April board meetings, they would have opportunity to discuss it within our zone. And then at our May zone meeting, they would be informed when they come to the zone meeting. So I know that pushes up your timeline a little bit, and it's just crazy when you think about it, that this is all for something that's going to happen November 21st week. So it's crazy, but that's timelines. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing and thank you for that. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to 11.4, which I have as the PSBAA meeting report. Can you turn your mic on? Thanks.
I would encourage everyone to find the time to enroll in the University of Alberta course, Indigenous Canada course. It doesn't cost anything. It's just, it goes through, it's from the University of Alberta. A number of people have got a number of units done, but it doesn't take that long. But I think it's well worth it for our trustees to do that. Other than that, I think just that the spring general meeting will be as same as ASBA. It'll be down in Calgary this year. So maybe a few more. And I forgot to mention on our calendar that we're meeting with the PSBAA president and executive secretary on the 14th of March at 7 o'clock, right?
Yeah, as part of our committee of the whole. Yes.
Yes. So let's mark that down. It'll be a good opportunity. Just a thing, please go on to their website. They have lots of good research. They have lots of good programs available. And I think it's well worth it for the trustees to look at that.
Excellent. Any questions for Craig? Thank you for, oh, go ahead, Andrea.
Will we be able to find that U of A course easily just by Googling it? Okay.
Well, no, you just go into, like, everybody got our password
Through there.
and then you go into this, and the website is very easy to find. And when you go in there, you'll also find a lot of other things that you could look at as far as education for the trustees. So, and I would just mention that we did at our board, we did learn a little bit about parliamentarian, the Roberts rules, and that was quite interesting. So,
excellent. Thank you, Tyler.
Just a question for Craig. The PSBAA meeting, is that prior to the ASBA or after?
This year it'll be prior to.
So it's on the weekend, like the Friday, Saturday?
Yeah.
Is it 2 days, 3 days? Do you know the dates, I guess, is what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
the dates
If I just
are,
ask the question the way it should be worded, do you know the dates?
yes, I do.
Okay.
It's from the 1st to the 3rd. And then the 4th is a free, basically, ASBA starts on the evening of the 4th, I think, with a reception, and then it'll go there. Usually they have a really good, like last year at the general meeting, we had the Lieutenant Governor of Alberta speak. And I would like to invite her down to Lethbridge Public because she has some really good insights into being kicked out of a country and given 1 month to get out and take a suitcase. And so it would be nice to have her come down and talk. And she's willing to do that too. So anyway, yes, 1st to the 3rd. up in Calgary at the Weston. And if you go online right now, there's actually, you can register and book a room through public school boards.
Okay, and we should probably get Kristen to book our rooms for June 4th, 5th, the Sunday, Monday. If you could just book probably 5 rooms and then send out an email just to get confirmation that's at the Weston in Calgary. And then just ask for, yeah.
They've got a special rate, so especially go through PSBAA and ASBA.
Okay. Sounds good. So next is 11.5 Boundary Review Committee. Craig.
Yes, we created that in September and we haven't had a meeting. And we probably should have a meeting.
I was actually kind of waiting till we got through capital planning because I needed data. But even without that, we could start to have a meeting to talk about, because it's really next year we need to start rolling on boundaries and whatnot. So does April, May work sometime in there?
How about instead of us figuring out the details here, you want to send out an email and we'll figure out from there. Excellent. Thanks. So carrying on with our agenda, you'll see that letter in there from Elk Island Public in regards to the nutrition funding piece. And that is everything. So with that, I will ask for a motion for us to move back into camera. Christine, and those in favor? And that's carried.